Hello, welcome back to my channel. I'm an average reader, and this BookTube channel is all about reading, talking books, e-readers, everything in between all of that from the average reader's perspective. I'm going to try and keep this intro short and sweet. This is part 2 of my bookshelf tour, which had been heavily requested before I did the first one. As I explained in the first one, I don't have like standard bookshelves in terms of lots and lots of rows of shelving, because we moved flat and I had to downsize. So a lot of my books are in storage. We do have this big TV sort of unit thing you can see here, which we have commandeered some of the spaces for books. And each one has 2 rows of books. So it would take me a long time to just do one video where I cover all of them. So I'm doing a square at a time. So there will be 4 parts, maybe a bonus one because there is a hidden cube down here. And today we're focusing on shelf number 2, which at a glance seems to be fantasy science fiction. So if that's your thing, then you're in for a thrill. Something I did consider is I do read a lot of fantasy and science fiction. That's why I'm wearing a Legend of Zelda t-shirt to be on brand. Most of the sci-fi and fantasy books that I've read in the last couple of years have been on e-reader. So there's a lot of really popular ones that aren't going to be on this shelf. If you are new here and you are into BookTube, all sort of bookish content and all of that jargon that when I'm doing these intros, I never remember the words I should be saying, then by all means like and subscribe. If you're waiting to check out how this video goes, then let's just dive straight in. So, as I said last time, a lot of us readers fill our shelves with all sorts of little trinkets. If you haven't seen part 1, you can go and check that out on my channel now to find out more about this shelf and these trinkets. But as far as these ones go, there's not actually a massive story behind them, to be honest. They're just purely decorative. So this is just simply a green candle I like the look of, so I got. I burnt it once and thought, no, it's too pretty to burn. This is, I don't even know, green vase thing, but these are pretty cool. This was a birthday present from my older brother, and it is Lego Fantastic Four characters. I hope you can see them. And then another candle, and this one is just a simple IKEA candle, which apparently burns for 25 hours, and I've probably burnt it for like 20 minutes. So maybe I'll give that a burn after this when I'm reading. And we're just going to jump straight into the books. The same as the first video. Obviously, I can see these. I know what's coming up here. I don't know what's behind those books. Some of them might be my partners. If they are my partners, much like in the first video, I won't cover them because some of his books, if not most of them, are heavily work related. He's a cognitive behavior therapist. As much as that does interest me, I do enough of that stuff at work so that I don't want to have to come home and read about that for fun. I'm just going to dive in with the first selection. Okay. Wow, this is a bit of a strange start. So this is a book that I got about 2 months ago now, pretty long than that, 3 months ago, at a charity store, and it is Neil Gaiman, American Gods. So I heard lots of great things about this book and was very excited to read it, and it was on the list to be read as I've been cycling through different books. Then I got my Kobo, so I was distracted with that. And in the meantime, and I'm not here to talk about them, I don't know enough about it, talk at full length about it anyway, but then I did see the headlines about Neil Gaiman and some things that are going on there that are very controversial, which again, I'm not going to delve into too much. I don't know the full story of any of it. I've just sort of seen headlines. So to be honest, it did go off my radar reading this. It is still a story I'd like to read. Maybe I will come back to it at some point. We'll see. Then next on this list this is not sci-fi and fantasy. This must have just been chucked there because I didn't know where else to put it. But it is Glasgow Boys by Margaret McDonald, which was a book I read earlier this year and absolutely loved it. It's got themes where it's dealing with young people growing up in care home settings and like isolation and anxiety, depression, all of those sort of things that a young person may experience. Also, one of them happens to be a young gay man. And it follows the story of these 2 best friends through all of that. And it was really, really good. Something that was really important for me in this book is that there's quite a lot of inflammatory bowel disease discussion because I did find out later after tweeting about the book, the author actually has IBD, much like myself. So we did have a little exchange on Twitter, which is really cool, which didn't influence how much I enjoyed this anyway. I loved it, but that was just an extra little cherry on top. So if you are into what I described, then absolutely check it out. It's sad, but also really uplifting. It's just really... It's a warm book. I think it's a perfect book for autumn. Okay, next we have this beast, Shogun, which isn't sci-fi and fantasy, but it is very epic, and the time period often feels like fantasy because it's just so crazy. I reread this because of the TV show. Really enjoyed it all over again. It is a bit of a slog. It was quite a beast, as you can see. So it's not a fast read, but if you haven't read it, I would highly recommend it. This one is also not sci-fi and fantasy, but it is very good, very important. The Great Believers by Rebecca Makkai. This chronicles a story of a group of friends. It's sort of set between two time periods. So you've got the 80s, and it's a group of friends navigating the AIDS crisis. And then you've got sort of a flash forward. One of the characters, when they're older, having issues with their daughter, who has sort of run off and joined a cult. I don't want to say too much about it, but this was a really good read. Again, highly recommend it. This is one I wanted for a long time, and I couldn't get it anywhere. I kept trying to order it, but I wanted this cover, and in the UK, they only had the multicolored one. And then I was walking past the trusty charity shop that is on my street that every now and then a book that I've wanted will just be in the window. So yeah, really important book, especially if you're into your queer history. I just think a lot of us, so like myself as a gay man, I owe so much to the people, whether it's fiction or not. It's obviously based on the experiences of the people in the 80s that endured and endured and endured for us to get here. So I am always up for reading anything about that period of time, especially. Oh, next up, we finally have something that is sort of sci-fi. This is The Passage by Justin Cronin. Read this last year. This is one I started in physical and then moved on to Kindle. At the time, I had a Paperwhite. Because it's the size, it's just the same for me with all these sci-fi and fantasy books, is normally these ones just become really inconvenient to carry around, especially hardback. So I often switch to ebook, but keep the physical. This is basically the first part of what I think is a trilogy of what can best be described as a zombie apocalypse, but instead of zombies, it is vampires. And it was really cool. Lots of supernatural stuff, and there's like a child, there's always a child, the chosen child, who has these powers that you've got to protect. Lots of epic, I love books when there's lots of travel and journeys and they've got to get somewhere, like questing. So that was all really good. I started the second one the week after I finished this one. So for whatever reason, I couldn't get into the sequel. Maybe I'll go back to it at some point. But for now, it's sort of been put aside and I'm just enjoying other things. But this one, really good. I actually think it could have probably been standalone if it wasn't for the fact that there's sort of some cliffhangery stuff. But yeah, I'd read it. If you're into vampires and zombie apocalypses, then this is basically The Walking Dead with vampires. So I would absolutely give it a go. This is probably the most unlikely book to be on this shelf, and it is Speaking Out by Ed Balls. For those of you who aren't from the UK, he is a ex-UK politician who now hosts morning breakfast television and was on a show called Strictly Come Dancing. I am a fan of Ed Balls. My partner's a big fan of him. This was a birthday present for him. He enjoyed this book. I don't know much about it. I've not read it. I probably would read it, or I'd listen to it on Audible. I do like to hear my memoirs and things on Audible. Something important about him that I always remember is he had a stammer, quite a bad stammer. And obviously, if you're a politician, that could be quite detrimental for you doing public speaking and things. And he overcame that with lots of techniques and things that I think he discusses in this book, and he talks about at length in interviews. He also did an amazing documentary about the care service in our country. And he actually went in and worked as a care support worker to see what it's like, and also discuss how much they're paid or underpaid, really. And that was a great documentary. And for someone like me that works in the healthcare service, it made me respect him a lot. So now that I'm talking about him, I probably will read this. And the final book on this shelf is not actually a book. It is a notepad that I brought on a trip to the Warner Brothers Studio Tour, so the Harry Potter Studio Tour in London. It's advanced potion making, and I loved it so much that I haven't written a single thing in it because I don't want to ruin it. So it was a bit of a silly purchase, really, because I don't think I'll ever want to write in it. So that is our top rack done. So it's now we're going to go into the first layer of books. This might be a lot shorter than the first one because you can just see from glancing at the shelf that they're all quite beastly books, as sci-fi and fantasy always are. So there's less of them for me to talk about. So we're going to start with, I already know, an absolute favorite of mine, which is Dune. If you don't know what Dune is, especially after the movies have come out, then where have you been? But it's a sci-fi epic. People often compare it with Star Wars and Star Wars stole from Dune and blah, blah. I don't really get into all of that. I just enjoy the fact that there is a Dune and there is a Star Wars. This is a book that I actually read before I saw any of the films, which I'm always so grateful for, because many of these massive franchises, I'll see the film and find out it was a book and be devastated I didn't read the book first. But that didn't happen with this. Absolutely enthralled by this. I read it 4 times before I ever saw the film. There's not many books that I actually reread like that. There's books that I love and I save loads of passages from, but not many that I go back to and read all the way through again. And this was one of those. Interestingly, I've not read any of the sequels. I do own the sequels in various forms. For some reason, I haven't moved on yet. I think I'll probably read Dune Messiah, which is book 2, before the new film comes out. Again, because I'd rather have the version in my head from the book first before I see the film. Although I will say, I don't know how Denis Villeneuve did it, but it is like he took what was in my head and threw it on the screen, because the films I just adored almost as much as the book. And the next book is Dune Messiah. I've already just explained to you that I've not actually read it. Very cool cover though. A lot smaller than Dune, so it is a much quicker read, I'm sure. I've been told this one's far more political versus the first one, which is political, but there's a lot of action. So I pretty well, I want to get this done before the film comes out. Next up is The Man in High Castle by Philip K. Dick. I know this is also a TV series. I brought this with every intention of reading it, and it's such a beautiful edition of it. It's sort of like a hardcover with no paper sleeve, and it's painted on almost. Very vibrant looking. Not read it, so I can't say too much about it. I think the premise is that it is an alternate version of the future, or I guess at present, where during the world wars, Hitler actually won. So it's sort of like, what would the world look like? It is one of those that I look at all the time and think, I need to read that book. Why haven't I read it yet? So maybe I'll do like a video where we decide what should actually be my reading list moving forward. And I set out like, I don't know, 5 of the physical books I own where I will actually read them in that order just to get them done, because I don't know how else to do it at this point, because something always comes up on my Kobo library or on the store, or just I just walk past the shop window and buy another book and start that, and it just, you know what it's like, it's stress. Okay, so next up we have The Assassin's Apprentice by Robin Hobb, book 1 of the Farseer trilogy. I did read this. I loved this, adored this, thought it was magnificent. So much about it. I just, what a book, right? So I raced through it, thrilled to have found a new series that I was completely besotted by. Follows a young boy who is a bastard. So he's royal blood, but he's sort of shamed. He joins the king's, he goes to the castle to be trained as the king's assassin, and all sorts of things happen to him in between that. And he can talk to animals. Very cool, but that is a gift that is frowned upon. None of those are spoilers. They're all literally on the back here. Really good book. Really enjoyed this. Great introduction. It's a great intro to fantasy. If you want to step into that world and you haven't really gone into it yet and you're worried that it's just going to be crazy, this is a good way in. Even though there's elements of there that I just mentioned, it's quite grounded. So I think that's what I enjoyed about it. Next on my list is the sequel, Royal Assassin. I've got some bad news. I started this and I got about 300 pages in and I just could not get into it. I don't know what it is about it. I think the theme that is arising here is I struggle with sequels to things that I really enjoyed. Maybe I'll go back to this if you're someone that read it and absolutely loved it and you can think of reasons that aren't spoilers to tell me why I should go back to it. Then maybe I'll check it out, but it just wasn't working for me. What I like is when the character goes on a journey. So like, they start somewhere, things happen, they're moving around, lots of exploration and stuff. And this one was heavily set in the castle. I just got bored, to be honest. So if you can think of any stories I don't mention in this video where that does also happen, by all means tell me what they are and I'll put them on my wish list. Next is City on Fire by Garth Risk Hallberg. I have not read this. It's a bit of a beast. I think it's a crime thriller. I picked it up on sale in a bookshop because I saw a couple of people on the front like Stephen King praising it. So it made me want to read it. Midnight, New Year's Eve, 1976. 9 lives are about to be changed forever. That's all I read and I was like, yes. But then I saw that it was all snowy and then read that it happens around Christmas. So I was like, right, I'm going to save this book for Christmas time. So I will be reading this, but it will be like November of this year because I got it in February. So that's how my brain works. That's how it has to work. That's how I have to do it. Second to last book of the shelf now. This one is an absolute classic. I I'm sure a lot of you will have either read this. If you haven't, I recommend it. The Once and Future King by T.H. White. And it's basically the story of King Arthur with all the fun and the magic and everything. It is an epic. It starts out following Arthur as a young boy, and you just follow him through his life. And it's a great ride. And it's exactly the sort of thing what I was saying about Royal Assassin is what is in here, where it's just following this character on a long journey and just going loads of new places and new characters. So if that's your thing and you haven't read it, then I recommend it. The final one in this row really needs no introduction. J.R.R. Tolkien, The Lord of the Rings, all 3 books in 1 volume. This is one of those, my biggest regret for the book is that I never read the book before I saw the film. In my defense, I was a 11-year-old who the idea of reading something like this that wasn't Harry Potter was like, no. Like, what is this Lord of the Rings thing? And why? It's so old. Like, how could it possibly interest me? Then I saw the films and, oh man, Lord of the Rings is one of my absolute loves. It's my soul. It's my blood. It's my life force. I love it. I'm one of the few people that also love Rings of Power. So when I tell you I love everything about Lord of the Rings, just put me in that world doing anything and I'm happy. And so I did read it afterwards, but it's just not the same when you sort of know most of the plot. I wish I could read this without knowing what was going to happen. And those of you that got to do that, I'm so jealous of you. So we're at the end of that first row. So now we're going to dive into the back row. Is that what I'm calling them? I think it is what I'm calling them. As we've gathered already, there are some outliers there. So it's not all fantasy and sci-fi. You can see I've just chucked everything on these shelves at times. After I did the first video, I did reorganize the shelf a little bit. And I'm going to do the same with this one. When I've done, by the time I do the 4th video, it will be completely reorganized. So that will be nice. At least whilst I'm forcing myself to make the video, I am reorganizing at the same time. So we'll dive straight into the back row. And we've got A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms by George R.R. Martin. This is excellent. Game of Thrones, well, set in Game of Thrones world. It's a century before, and it follows 2 heroes, so a knight and then a young squire, Sir Duncan and Egg. And this, again, is a really good entry point book for if you wanted to get into Game of Thrones, but you're not sure if it's for you. These are basically short stories following the same 2 characters, a lot shorter than the Game of Thrones books, which are massive beasts, and easier to follow because you're focused on 2 characters as opposed to Game of Thrones, which will have anything between like 5 characters and 644. Next we have Batman, The Court of Owls. So for any of you that aren't aware, and I'm sure most of you are aware, but I wasn't aware, that you can buy novelizations of graphic novels. As much as I love to read a comic book, sometimes I prefer a book. I think with comic books, the fact that it's all drawn out for me is sometimes annoying. I'd like rather just have loads of text to read and properly visualize it in my mind. And being able to buy these has been a godsend. So this is the storyline for the Court of Owls, who are basically a group who control Gotham from the shadows. I don't want to say too much about them. If you are into Batman and you didn't know you can get the novels, then have a look. You can also get The Killing Joke. And then there's like Harley Quinn books and Wonder Woman books and Superman books. I have mentioned in a previous video, one of my Superman novels, which is my pride and joy. But you can also get Marvel novels as well, which are based on different storylines. So I had showed my X-Men one in a previous video, and I've got some Spider-Man novels. You didn't know it was a thing, and now you're like, oh my God, then literally go do some Googling and you will find a plethora of comic-based novels. Next is a absolute legend in the sci-fi and fantasy genre, Brandon Sanderson, Skyward Claim the Stars. I haven't read this. My stepdad is obsessed with this book series and absolutely loves it and keeps telling me how much I'd enjoy it. And I probably should start it at some point. Again, it's one that was hidden. I'm going to try and bring it forward when I do the reorganizing so I can remember that it exists on my bookshelf, and then I will hopefully give it a go. From what I know about it, it's going to be like a space pilot fighting off an alien race. It's all very classic sci-fi, and I do want to read it, hence me owning it. Next on here is quite a big step from sci-fi and fantasy. It's Dead Lions by Mick Herron. I think one of my subscribers once commented on a video because I mentioned that I love the Slough House book series, and they said they also love it. So if you watch this video and you see me holding this up, this is my proof to you that I am genuinely a fan of the series. The thing is, this is the second book. All the other ones I have on my Kobo. So I've read much beyond this, but I only own the second book. I don't even know why I brought this one. Maybe I read the first one on Kindle, and I thought, oh, I want to read the second one physical. But great story. If you haven't seen the Apple TV show version of this, then you need to absolutely check it out because it's amazing. It's got Gary Oldman in it. Absolutely top class stuff. So the next, I just saw both books and thought I should just pick them both up anyway. I've just picked them both up to just sort of zip through because it's going to be the same thing for both of them. You'll know what they are, I'm sure. They are globally famous now. Heartstopper, I think this is volume 1 and 2. Love these. Love the TV show. I am almost envious of young people today because when I was a teenager, stuff like this just didn't exist. So it's just really cool that it does now. Makes me happy for the younger generation. And the show is great, and I'm looking forward to the new season, which I think comes out at the end of this year. But I think it was my cousin that got me these because we went through a lot growing up. And she sort of said, I wish you'd had these when you were young, and sent me them as gifts. Which, so, yeah. But these are... Sorry, yeah, I just opened this, and there's a little note in there, which is very sweet, so it caught me off guard. But I will read the note without names. And it says, I wish I could have gifted this to younger, my name, which I never use on here because I try and separate me from my work. Sorry. But I still think you'll enjoy this. Love from, and then my cousin. Very sweet. And I do have the others. I don't know why everything's so spaced out and split up. It's, again, because of the fact I don't have the big shelves. As soon as I move, and I have got big shelves again, things like this will be on full display. We're coming to the last couple of books now. I think I know what this is. Yeah, it's okay. So this is an old classic, Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows, J.K. Rowling. This is like an OG cover version because I went and got it the day it came out. So as I've said in previous videos, I grew up with Harry Potter. Love the Harry Potter book series. I had all of the originals, and I think my Philosopher's Stone was a very early edition because I got it like the year it came out. Because my mum's friend kept reading the short stories in the newspaper and saying to her, oh, I think your son would like Harry Potter. You need to get it him. And so she did, thinking he probably won't even care because he doesn't really read or anything. And I did love it. And it was the first book series I ever really got into, like so many kids of my generation. And I still have this one. So I think the others have sort of been passed around the family and stuff. So they're all sort of everywhere. So I think I only really have this one and 2 more in storage. I don't know which ones. But yeah, I don't need to explain this, because everybody knows what Harry Potter is. And just a disclaimer, for those of you that are waiting for me to now talk about J.K. Rowling and J.K. Rowling's views and all of these, I'm not here to get into any of that. The same way I'm not here to talk about Neil Gaiman's controversies and all of that stuff. Like I'm here to talk about books and my love of books, full stop. So next on this list, we have one of my favorite books, and it's not sci-fi and fantasy, it's more like historic fiction, but it is one of my favorite books. And it's Cormac McCarthy's Blood Meridian. I said before, I thoroughly enjoy a Western, movies, books, audiobooks, whatever. I love the Wild West. I think it's just so cool. One of my favorite games ever is Red Dead Redemption 1 and 2, and the zombie side bit. Just perfection. Anticipating Red Dead Redemption 3. Please don't let me down, Rockstar. If I ever make it as some big global YouTuber, you'll be the first people I contact and be like, where is Red Dead Redemption 3? This book is just great. It's brutal, vicious, unpredictable. If you're fans of a Western, then absolutely give this one a go. This is a really cool edition. I managed to get it sent over from America via eBay, and I love it, and I won't part with it. Now we're down to the final book on this shelf, which isn't, again, it's not fantasy and sci-fi, but I can see what I was going for here, because again, it's like historic. I think this is probably more fiction, even though it's based on true events. And it's another one I don't really need to explain. War and Peace by Leo Tolstoy. I have actually read this. I'm one of those insufferable people that has read this book. And it starts off slow and it's hard. But once you get into it, it's a bit like reading like Game of Thrones or watching Downton Abbey. You're just there for all the gossip and drama, really. But yeah, it's a good story. Again, I started this physical version. Look how small that text is. So I started that, and then it was when I was working at the ambulance service. So in between emergency calls, I was reading War and Peace, which sounds like the most obnoxious, cliche thing in the world, but that's the truth. And then I just got so sick of the tiny writing and the size of it that I went and brought it on Kindle for 99p and just read it on there, which was so much more enjoyable. You can highlight passages. I could remember who was who because you can bring up the X-ray thing and look at all the characters' names and stuff. So I would recommend, if you do want to read War and Peace, do it on an e-reader. And there we have it. That is the end of part 2 of my bookshelf tour. I hope you enjoyed it. As you can see, the space is now empty. We managed to get through all of the books this time, whereas last time some of them weren't mine. So again, if you haven't seen part 1, you can go back and check that out now. Depending on when you watch this video, there might already be part 3 and 4 out. If they are in existence, they will have been added to the description of this video. And if you enjoyed that video, if you're new here, then by all means, like and subscribe. Leave a comment below. I love to hear what you guys are reading, how you're getting on with it. Again, I'm like the average reader, so I do try and keep it quite simple. I'm not really about those reading challenges where I've got to read like 65 books in 1 hour. I'm literally just about enjoying reading and then sharing that passion with you guys and then hearing from you guys what you're enjoying. And that's no shade to people that do the challenges. It's just not me. Thank you guys for watching. Take care, and I will see you for part 3.